an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Soulsmith Chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11. In these chapters, Lyndon meets a really amazing old lady and gets her to agree to take him on as a sort of servant, apprentice. Oh, there's a lot of things that you could use to describe what's happening here, and it's a lot of fun. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andrew for commissioning this episode. So this section, I'm going to take a minute before I get started and go back a tad because I ran out of time at the end of the last episode and I didn't get a ton of opportunity to talk about Jai Long and what's going on with him. The way that the last section ended was right before Jai Long and some of the Fishers sort of went head to head. And I wanted to discuss what it is that it seems Jai Long is up to. Because we didn't really get a chance to talk about the legend of this woman who has the spear buried or left somewhere in this pyramid. And I'm trying to find the exact spot where that story is told because it's part of the welcome wagon thing when Yaren and Lyndon first arrived. Jai Sen is the one, who's explaining how this pyramid suddenly came to be. And then he talks about like the way that this story has been told and the various, some people say it's this, some people say it's that, but everybody seems to agree that the spear is somewhere in the pyramid. And Jai Lin apparently 100% believes that. I think that the aura being pulled in that direction indicates something of that nature, but it could also be that they are doing, maybe it's something to do with the exploration. Maybe it's something that Jai Lin has put in place and it's not actually the spear itself that's causing this to happen. I don't know. But, let's see. I'm trying to find the spot where he explains this story. Oh, no, because we go into the fight here first. See, this is the problem. When I run out of time and then I try and pick it up, it's never easy to do. But I feel like that's really the most pressing matter is talking about Jai Lin because everybody is after this thing. And I didn't really get a chance to mention his reaction to hearing that the Aurelius family is coming, because that's a pretty big factor in this section, is his reaction to hearing they're heading this way and the effect it has when he shares that news with other people. And it's clear that this name means something to most. It doesn't sound to Lyndon like it makes any impression on him at all. It doesn't seem from his reaction that he recognizes their name. But evidently, everybody seems to take it for granted that if the Aurelius family arrives, whatever they've been working on here is going to be taken over completely. So everyone seems to be sort of fighting the clock and trying to do as much as they can and gain as much ground as they can before they get here. I get the feeling that Jai Lin would like to be done before they get here because that would render them moot somehow, but I'm not entirely sure what he thinks he's going to be able to manage. If he thinks that this spear is going to get him to Underlord. Jai Long. Thank you, Andrew. Sorry. I'm looking at Jai Sen right now. So I got to the part with the spear is the prize of the transcendent ruins. The ruins are a treasure in themselves, drawing vital aura from hundreds of miles around and filled with ancient secrets of great power. But the one everyone seeks, the weapon that could elevate one faction to the heavens, is the spear. Almost 1,000 years ago, the desolate wilds were totally lawless, plagued by beasts and by wild sacred artists no better than animals themselves. Each man considered himself an emperor, each woman an empress, and they ruled whatever they could take at the end of a blade. But one day, a woman emerged from nowhere with a shining spear in her hands. She united these rogue sacred artists under one name, killing all those who resisted and spreading law and civilization across the wilds. No one could stand against them because no one could oppose her, or rather, no one could oppose her spear. Her weapon was said to devour spirits. When she destroyed a remnant, she consumed its power until she grew so strong that she could slay entire armies at a stroke. For the next 2 centuries, while she lived, all the wilds remained peaceful under her rule. The story of her death is a long one, but it's enough to say that the ruins rose on the day of her death. She entered, taking the spear, and never emerged. Some say she received the spear from the ruins in the beginning, and she was only returning the power she had borrowed. I believe that it was a test, that she locked her strongest weapon into a secure vault to safeguard her legacy until a descendant could claim it once again. And this is the thing that Jai Long is after, that he says everybody else is thinking too small about. And there's a lot of talk from various points of view in this section about how everybody seems to see power as the absolute end all of determination of worth and I'm trying to think of like caste, really. You are on the top of the pyramid if you are the strongest. And a lot of people are of the opinion that is a mistake and sort of see that from different perspectives. So when we go to Jai Long, 2 things remain true to a reasonable degree. For one thing, it was almost absolutely true that the spear remained somewhere in the ruins. There were hundreds of eyewitnesses to the Jai matriarch's entrance, and while popular stories said she died within, her closest advisors recorded that she emerged from the ruins weak and battered. That's interesting to me. Like the spear had been the complete source of her strength, and without it, she maybe sort of wilted. She told those advisors she'd left the spear within and died days afterward. He had enough information to consider that story true. But there was a second fact he'd verified, and it was equally important. The spear really had devoured the strength of the remnants and added their strength to that of the matriarchs. One of her advisors had observed the process, even noting down possible methods and some runes on the spear's shaft that might have been some form of script. The early Jai clan had tried to reproduce the spear, but had ultimately failed. No one else had considered the nature of that ability, except that it was a powerful way to advance quickly. The others, he was sure, sought the spear for one reason alone. With it, they might be able to break through the bonds of true gold. There was only one underlord in the desolate wilds, and only a handful of the Black Flame Empire. Advancing past true gold meant advancing beyond the realms of common sense to rise from the earth to the heavens in one leap. They all thought so small. More accurately, their vision was narrow. Jai Long's competitors, including the Sandviper sect, were so focused on advancement that they neglected to consider what it meant to consume someone else's power. No one could gather Madra that was too different from their own. That was a fundamental law, and one that Jai Long had no reason to believe the spear could break. If he, whose Madra carried aspects of light and the sword, tried to absorb a Sandviper remnant, the spear might allow him to do it. his Madra would gain a toxic aspect, and he would have a harder time finding the right aura to cycle, but he should be able to do it. But then, if he took a Fisher's remnant, what would happen? There was a point beyond which the absorption would fail. Even if it didn't, the different types of Madra could mix in violent or chaotic ways. It might even damage his core, or the Madra could rebound on him and tear his body apart. So this is really interesting, and it's the sort of thing that I just don't even know. Like, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around why it would be something he could manage with the Sand Vipers, but not at all with the Fishers. I am assuming the Sand Vipers being like vaguely allied to the Jai clan means that their Madras are somewhat similar, but that might not be true at all. Everyone envisioned taking the spear and gathering the power of their enemies into one body. That was just a childish fantasy. It would never work. The spear would be at its best when devouring compatible Madra. In other words, Madra from sacred artists on the same path. If Jai Long held the spear, he could advance by doing nothing more than cutting down others on the path of the stellar spear, blood members of the Jai clan, and gutting their remnants. The spear's nature aligned so closely with his own desires that he almost considered it the will of the heavens. So basically, what he's saying here is, everybody's like, oh, if I just had this spear, it would be all good. And they're not thinking through how this would work. I am. And the way it would work is, if I killed my entire family with it, I would be basically unstoppable. And I really, really want to kill my entire family already. So I think we can all agree, obviously, this spear is meant for me. Right? Obviously. And I can't help but laugh because, like, this is... he is like the polar opposite of Lyndon in that he is treated a certain way, and his reaction is the exact kind of like resentment and desire for vengeance that Lyndon apparently does not have, despite the fact that Lyndon's got even more reason to feel the way that he does. There's, I think, an aspect here with Jai Long that he was treated as the rising star, and so having that taken away hurts more than for somebody like Lyndon, who from the moment that he took the test, they realized he was worthless, and so they ignored him. He never had a moment of believing that he was going to be this, like, you know, the answer to his family's prayers. So for him, he has never really... The only major loss he suffered was the initial test. And other than that, he has had more time to get used to the idea of who he is and how much harder he's going to have to work for everything. Whereas Jai Long, I think there's just a bit of entitlement that happened. And once that shit backfired, he's just so pissed now. And look, I'm not even mad at him about it. I would be too. Like, he did this all to save his sister, and they clearly did not give a shit about his sister. They would have much rather he let her die and not taken on this remnant that fucked his whole shit up. And his sister would have been, to them, a necessary casualty for the sake of their clan. And when you do something for a person that you love that you think is noble and good, and everybody sees it as just a mistake and your bad judgment, and then they essentially disown you, that's gonna sting a lot. But I do find it so funny. Basically, he's just like, man, this thing would work really well if I made sure to kill people that only were, like, related to me. And that's so what I wanted to do. This is perfect. Andy says, he's saying a little bit of incompatible Madra might be okay, but the more different types you mix in, the more dangerous and prone to failure it is. Yeah, and that part I get. The part and this is partially because we don't know yet, right? But the part I have trouble with is understanding which types of Madra are considered compatible, because I don't know. Like, for example, the light and the sword, which are the two things that he's like got mostly in his Madra. Why do light and sword go together is kind of what I mean. And what is it about the what are they called? Sand snakes, sand spears, sand crawlers, sand vipers. But why, what do they have also the same exact like sword and light Madra, or is it just close enough? Like their Madra has the toxic aspect that he talks about. Why does that seem like something that he could probably make work with the light and sword Madra, versus what if he just took a Fisher aspect? It sounds like when he says that, it's not adding a Fisher remnant on top of the others. It seems like he feels like probably with the sand vipers, thank God, if the sand vipers, he seems to think would work for him better than the Fishers. I think. And I want to know what it is about the Fisher's remnant that he thinks wouldn't work with him as well as the sand vipers. Unless I'm misunderstanding, and he is just talking about the Fishers on top of the sand viper, which maybe I'm just misunderstanding him. A path can be based on dissimilar Madra types, but once you have those Madra types in your core, then the concept of incompatibility comes in. So Jailong's clan, who all practice the same path, are totally compatible with the Madra in his core. Yeah, I get that. I'm just like, I'm trying to understand if there is any sort of element like to light and sword Madra that is more compatible with certain things than it would be with other things, if you get what I mean. But I might be like trying to think about this a little too hard. I also don't know how many different types of Madra there are, how specific Madra gets either. Because sword Madra is not something I would have expected. The fact that sword Madra exists surprises me, because I'm thinking that Madra purely occurs from organic items. So if there is like light Madra, light is a naturally occurring thing, something, you know, but the fact that sword Madra, which swords are a construction of human beings, but they have their own Madra anyway. That is something that I find so, like, you know, we have this whole thing with the spear. Is there spear Madra? Or is light Madra sort of turned into sword Madra somehow? Like, is one a spawn of the other? I'm just like really curious about how this all works together. I keep thinking about like the idea of maybe the, what's the word I want? Like the zodiac, and how there are like signs in the zodiac, but each of those signs also is associated with like an element. And if there's something like that. Anyway, I'm getting caught up on this, and this isn't even in this section, but I just wanted to talk about this. There was so much he despised about the Jai family, but there was a reason they were a first-class clan in the Black Flame Empire, while the Sand Vipers remained nothing more than a second-rate sect in the wilds. Without organization and control, strength meant nothing. And this is when this kid comes in. And the kid is like not meant to be the actual messenger he was supposed to receive. Gren is the one that he was supposed to receive. But this reason that he thinks about organization and control is because Gren got called away by his mom and he sent somebody else to take his place. There's no discipline here. There's not that sort of commitment to order and routine and structure. So this kid comes in and is talking about how there are too many beasts in the southwest corner of the pyramid, and the foreman said the miners can't get in there, asking for help. There was a message from the Jai clan. A low-gold stranger had a copper with her. And then finally, the important thing is she had beat Sand Viper Resh in the middle of her squad and then walked away with one of the Jai clan. And he realizes he, as a representative of the Sand Viper sect, wanted to avenge Resh's humiliation. He couldn't punish a low gold under Jai protection. He would have to target the copper instead. And then the kid says, oh, there's another thing that I heard as a rumor, kind of. And he says that the Aurelius family is coming. And Jai Long has a very, very, very extreme reaction to this and basically grips him up to the point where he almost kills the kid. It says it was only a last-minute awareness that prevented him from accidentally ripping the boy's arms off. And when he says, you know, when are they coming? I don't know. They just said Aurelius. I don't know what it means. And finally, he is realizing that this kid is starting to cry and feels really disgusted with himself and lets the kid down and says, my deepest regrets. And the kid looks shocked because obviously he did not expect any sort of apology. And it's a weird thing where obviously Jai Long is a little bit of a piece of shit. However, he clearly has a code of some kind. So abusing this innocent child is not something that he does without thinking. And that interests me. I want to know more about where he draws the line on things and what he considers appropriate and not. And I want to know how much of that is influenced by image and how much of that is influenced by his own personal... Because this is, he feels disgusted with himself. It is not, what would people think if they saw this? It's he not believing this is the right thing to do. And that's a very different thing. So I'm just super, super curious about this kid. So when we go to the beginning of this actual section, he is about to throw down with one of the Fisher sect. And he gave this woman the chance to walk away. And she's just like, you know what? Fuck you. And basically spits at him and then throws her hook forward. And this is a pretty good time because they get interrupted by a bunch of spiders. And what this, I think that ending it where I did last time was so perfect because basically the last section was us meeting Jai Long and us meeting Eithan. And this scene brings everybody together. So Jai Long is about to fucking get in this shit. And then Eithan rolls up and is like, oh, word? We're about to get a fight? Shit, yes. What are we doing, kids? Let's watch. Eithan is all about it. Eithan just wants some shit to happen because he's bored and is just looking for something to do. Honestly, Eithan is a bit of a mood for me lately. And I love the moment where Lyndon's looking around as these spiders begin to descend and he makes eye contact with Eithan because he thinks it's got to be somebody with a lot of power drawing these things down. Who's doing it? And he looks at Eithan, who looks bonkers, by the way. Long yellow hair that he had seen before, at least he assumed it was the same man. In a camp this size, perhaps there were many disciples of this strange path that lightened hair color. He was wearing intricate robes of blue and white, so that the cape on his shoulders was raised and separated to resemble wings. It looked as though he'd prepared for a parade. Guys, later on, he says that he prefers to arrive at the head of a parade, and I just loved that, callback, that he likes that best and he makes sure to dress as if that's what's going to happen at any moment. And that's really a way to live, be prepared for a parade at any moment. He met Lyndon's glance with eyes of pale blue, no doubt another consequence of his gold sign. He gave a cheery wave. Is Eithan my favorite? Is that what's happening? Because he sounds so fucking funny. He's a weird combo of a little bit dismissive, but not in a way that feels contemptuous. It's not like, oh, you little people. It's more like, oh, I forgot. You're all the way back there. You don't know yet. You don't know anything. You're okay. This is going to be really fun because you're going to start to figure it out. I can't wait to watch you figuring it out in this way that like a parent is with their kid, where they're like, oh, I forgot. You don't know how to read. Oh, I'm going to teach you how to read. This is going to be amazing. And he's just filled with this sort of like low level excitement all the time about everybody else's interactions, because he has been through so much and is apparently so old that he can't really get surprised by things often. And so he has to sort of, it's like people listening to Unspoiled, where they read the book already, but they want to get that feeling back again. So they listen to somebody else experiencing it for the first time. That's like what he does in life, is just walk around and watch other people experiencing shit for the first time and sort of like vicariously live through them and enjoy their reactions to stuff, because they are new and fresh and have this like, you know, outlook on the world that he doesn't have anymore. But it's not like, because there's a lot of writing that portrays beings, and I say beings because I'm not convinced this dude is human, or if he is, he's like at another level of some kind. But a lot of writing portrays this sort of person who has been alive a long time as ultimately so jaded and indifferent that they become almost a nihilist because of it. And I enjoy a lot that it seems that things have sort of had the opposite effect on him. And that's maybe partially because it seems like he has a bit of an objective rather than just simply existing. The way that he reacted when he sees Lyndon and Yaren to begin with, he was sort of like, oh, maybe I'll get these two up in my crew, in a way that makes me feel like he has something he's trying to accomplish. But anyway, so at this point, this woman rolls in, and I say rolls because it seems like she's on wheels, but then we see that she is on 8 legs, and we wind up finding out that these are not, because poor Lyndon thinks that this is some sort of like fucking mad scientist shit that they put together. But then he begins to realize that, you know, this is one of the drudges. And the spider she'd left behind was different than the others. It was bigger, its main body lower to the ground, its legs proportionately longer. It was duller, a flat gray, and it didn't seem to have a head. It looked almost like a mechanical disc with spider's legs attached to it. And this woman, it says she was everything that Lyndon had ever wanted to be. And no matter how powerful those sacred artists were, she had stopped them with nothing more than the presence of her constructs. And this bitch comes up to Jai Long and is like, who the fuck are you doing? What do you think this is? I know that you got your miners and you're used to ordering people around. We're not them and you don't get to do that. So what the fuck is the fucking problem? And the young fisherwoman stepped forward. Fisher Gesha, this was as far as she got before the Soulsmith turned and made a beckoning gesture. The young woman jerked forward as though pulled on an invisible string into her waiting slap. This bitch yanked the girl into her hand. Like, man, that is embarrassing. If I want the words of a silly girl, I will reach back 100 years and ask myself. The silly girl called me for help, and I come here expecting to see dread beasts by the thousand, and instead, here is a boy with a bag on his head threatening my sect. She calls him a boy with a bag on his head. Like, he's out here looking all fearsome with his red wrappings, and she's like, what is this? What are you doing? Come on. And I just can't. The way that she's handling this is so funny to me. This is like, if you guys have seen Kung Fu Hustle, when the landlady comes out, you know, and everybody's just like, oh, fuck. Like, that's the vibe I get from this lady. So Jailong then says, the Aurelius family is on their way. You have confirmed this? To our satisfaction, I can have the evidence delivered to you tomorrow. Fisher Geshe thought a moment longer, turned to the tall young woman again, and leaped 2 feet into the air and slapped her on the other side. Then once more. Stupid girl, selfish girl, your pride is more important than the sect? You think your honor will matter when Aurelius gets here? You think the Underlord will let your eyes touch his spear? And Lyndon, notably, does not know what Underlord means. It's the first time he has heard this, and he finds that very interesting. To which the young Fisher girl is like, I just thought he was lying. And the old lady's like, oh, you thought he was lying. How about you don't just decide whether some shit's true or not. You come and talk to me, and I will tell you if it's true or not, and you don't go doing shit like this, you idiot. And it's just such a great scene. I just love it so much. So at this point, Lyndon is just like, all right, obviously, this lady is the one. Obviously, I need her to teach me. I need everything she knows. Holy shit. And I just love this whole, like, vibe here because he's talking to Yeren about it. And Yeren he says, I'm going to see if she needs, well, a disciple is a strong word. So is apprentice. Maybe she needs someone to help sweep up her foundry. Be careful. You aim that arrow too high, it'll fall back down and catch you in the eye. And Lyndon basically is like, look, I know that this sounds silly to you, but I really need help here. And you don't want to teach me. Apparently you don't think you're up to it. I need this. And I know that you don't want to join up and you don't have to. But I do. I'm in this position. I really, really, really want you to come and stay. I don't want you to leave. But if you want to leave, I'm not going to, blame you for that. She kind of like reacts in this way that it felt like she got mad initially and then she sort of begins to calm down. And he's thinking to himself that it's selfish of him to ask her to stay in the first place. And it says, she pushed him on the shoulder. Straighten up. Don't beg me like that. It draws attention. When he straightened, she shifted in place and didn't meet his gaze. Follow the Fisher first, one step before the other. Can't tell you I'm going with you if I don't know where, can I? So he runs after her. And I love this so, so, so much because then we cut to Eithan. Eithan. I keep wanting to say Eithan because his EI just looks like Eithan. Let's see. Brian says Sword Madra is actually Sharp Madra, but Sword Madra sounds better. See, now that's even more curious. Sharp Madra, so is there dull Madra? Is there round Madra? Is there triangular Madra? In my opinion, just the narrator's voicing of Fisher Geshe is 100% worth the $2 Whisper Sync price for the audible narration. Yes, I've been listening to the audiobook too, and he does her voice very well. Which is funny because I haven't had any problem with the narrator so far, but he seemed just kind of to be doing not too much. And then she showed up and he just went all out all of a sudden doing like a very specific sound for her. So Eithan is super excited about Yeren and Lyndon. And he notes particularly that when the Fisher old lady came along, Fisher Geshe, that Yeren was constantly staring around, gathering Sword Madra to her in a very subtle way so that nobody else even noticed it. And he realizes that she was that sword sage's disciple and is like a little bit like, man, it must suck to put all that work into a student and then just die and not even get to like really reap the rewards of having trained somebody that well. Lyndon was another pleasant surprise. He had watched the proceedings with undisguised fascination, a hunger burning so hot that Eithan was somewhat tempted to warm his palms against him. He would have been treated badly for his Madra deficiency. That wasn't a difficult inference to make, but such mistreatment could have any number of disastrous effects on a young man. It seemed as though Lyndon hungered for self-improvement rather than revenge, and he wasn't cringing or sniveling. Eithan could certainly work with that. Such drive could, and possibly would, get the boy into trouble, but it also was the most indispensable ingredient in taking him past gold. No one walked far on any path without both resolve and desire. Coupled with his pure Madra, twin cores, and broad frame, Eithan was wondering if he could have designed a better recruit. The boy was simply a blank canvas waiting for the brush of a master. Well, there weren't any masters around, but Eithan would do his best anyway. Again, really interesting, because Eithan doesn't consider himself a master. Is that modesty, or is that another whole like measure system that I just don't know about yet? So he watches Lyndon following after Gesha, and is just like, I know she's going to put up a fight, and then she's going to take him in anyway. Instead, he let a whim lead him and followed the sand vipers. Kral and Jai Long were locked in conversation, and none of their subordinates were eager to interrupt. Eithan skipped along behind, touching down with one foot, and using an enforcer binding to launch himself far enough that he almost appeared to be drifting through the air. When he landed, he simply kicked off on the other foot. So I sort of imagine this as like when you're like hopping through a pool, you know, where your buoyancy carries you most of the way. Or like, on the moon, where your gravity is just much lower, so you're not being pulled down as easily. He was better at stealth than anyone expected, but it had never been his strongest approach. He preferred walking in the front door, preferably with a parade behind him and trumpets in front. So at this point, everybody's about to try and fight him. And the whole thing is it's sort of just like an exercise for him. Eithan is thinking about the way that they mine. They gathered these ingenious little scripted constructs at points of heavy vital aura, then operated the script while waiting for the devices to print scales. Where he'd grown up, the process was much more artistic, but perhaps less efficient. Maybe he could bring one of these devices back, have it copied. Again, super interesting that they do something similar, but it's extremely different. And this is where we hear about it leaving the operator vulnerable. Any aura convergence drew remnants and sacred beasts like flies to rotting meat, and anyone operating the mining construct was helpless, hence the guards. And that is what we find out a little bit later from Gesha, is that, she thinks that she is encouraging Lyndon to try and create his own scales, and explains to him, like, do you see how much concentration that took? You are basically a sitting duck. Jai started moving casually in Eithan's direction, and Eithan saw through the young man's intentions immediately. He puffed away at his pipe as though oblivious. When you saw everything, you usually had to pretend you didn't. It was more polite that way. And I love this so much. So this whole thing, Eithan is just like, I'm not doing this. He ducks out of the way as the sand vipers also try to fight him in such a way that they just keep on injuring one another. And it is so embarrassing. He thinks about the fact that the sand vipers use poison fog, but the poison fog would ruin the flavor of his pipe, so he would have to decline. Oh my God. So at this point, the fact that he has dodged the way that he has makes Jylong stop and be like, who are you? And he's like, yeah, I mean, you could just ask that before you try and stab a person, but I guess if we're going to play it this way, it's fine. You're welcome to come at me both at once. I don't have anything else to do for the evening. And he sees that Kral is about to just like refuse, and then he decides to let loose a bunch of insults just to encourage them. He sighed. Fine then. I spit on the honor of the Sand Vipers, that pathetic collection of cowards and cripples. You don't have a spine between you. You only use poison because it takes courage to face an enemy in battle, and I could improve on a Sand Viper warrior by stapling a snake to a scarecrow's arm. Also, your mothers were dogs, and your fathers were blind, and so on. Fight me. I love this so much. Guys, he's just like, oh, whatever. Can we fucking get the show on the road, please? Oh, God. So, yeah. And eventually there is a green fog around him, but he'd already slid to one side, letting that cloud stop Jylong in his tracks. Though Eithan walked evenly through the pack, every move of the Sand Vipers either struck an ally or blocked another's approach. To them, he must have looked like a ghost drifting through. To him, it was simple as a child following his father's footsteps in the mud while enjoying a nice pipe. So, I love it. It's just so good, y'all. It's just one of those moments where you're just like, I have no idea who this person is. I don't know what's going on, but goddamn, this isn't so satisfying to watch. Like, if for whatever reason, Eithan, we have offended you, I will take responsibility. Don't let petty issues come between you and the Sand Viper sect. Not when we could work together for mutual benefit. And Eithan looks at Jylong and is like, all right, see? You're not so bad at this, actually. I sought a diversion. You diverted me, for which I thank you. He bowed with a flourish of his stolen pipe. Until we meet again, gentlemen. He didn't turn around, but Jylong bowed to his retreating back. There was a wise man. Crow glowered and prepared a striker technique that hissed and spat with green fury on the edge of his hand before he growled in frustration and let it die. So there was a little wisdom in him, too. So yeah, he has his back to them, but he knows exactly what the fuck is going on. And he's just like, all right, let's see what you do. Let's see what you do. And they both actually make a smart choice. And he's like, good boys. So then we go to 9. And this moment with Gesha, she's walking in to the huge barn with all of her spiders. And she's yelling at that young girl, be here at dawn or I'll come root you out with my hook. And she's finally just stops dead, staring at the barn doors. And when she does this, I'm like, oh, she knows Lyndon's there and she's waiting for him to talk to her. And he just sits there looking around like, why'd she stop? What's going on? Why'd she? And finally, she just goes, do you know what happened to the last man who kept me waiting? I married him. That's a threat. This bitch is too much. So then he starts being like, oh, this one was ignorant. This one didn't realize. And she's like, stop calling yourself this one. This is ridiculous. Say I. Stop this. If you say that again, I'll spin your copper head around on your neck. Now tell me your name. And this is when he asks if he can help. And explains that his mother was a soulsmith, that he worked as her assistant as best he could. He's like, I know that I'm deficient, but I also know a lot of the basics, and I can dissect remnants, and I can do all of like the stuff that you're going to need to do. She says, you don't think I have enough to worry about? Go. If you bother me again, I'll set the spiders on you. And he's like, all right, I'm sure you're very tired. And she's like, yeah, I am, but that doesn't mean you should just wait here until tomorrow morning. And he's like, oh, I wasn't gonna do that, even though he absolutely was. And he says, if I may be so rude as to offer one last explanation. And she basically sends a construct after him. And he draws his half-silver dagger, and there follows a brief fight with this thing. And it's no joke. Like, you know, it is something that he really has to work at here. He sees the pack holding it like a shield as he flopped belly first onto the top of the spider construct. And at first he's like, haha, I pinned you. And then he begins to realize that it's pulling him down. And he's like, what? So with a good deal of writhing, he squirmed forward enough to get his left hand onto the spider's back. Then, adjusting his breathing from panic to a measured cycling technique, he fed pure Madra into the construct. Pretty neat, actually. The spider was an intricate clockwork of branching scripts. His Madra flowed through it, giving him a vague picture of its functions and of the scripts that had to remain active to keep it following orders. A spark of Madra came from a crystal flask, a tiny speck of a vessel that must power this construct's operation. Using his own Madra, Lyndon forced the flow from that flask aside. It didn't take much power to do so. There was no will behind that Madra, so it was easily directed. He simply blocked the flow into the script. The spider shivered once, then collapsed. The invisible force on him vanished, leaving him panting in gulps of air. This is pretty dope, honestly. He's just like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to go in there like fucking Ant-Man and pull some fucking shit apart. I'm going to take some wires out and see what happens. So this whole thing is just, I really enjoy her not even being like, all right, let me put you to a test. She just sends this thing after him. There's no promises associated with it. There's no explanation on her part. She's just watching to see how he handles it. He looked up to see Fisher Gesha an inch away from him, her gray bun even with his head, peering into the construct. Did you steal the path of the fisherman? No, honored elder, he said, though it was just a formality. If the path of the fisherman was what the fishers followed, and he had a good feeling that it was, she would be able to sense that power on him if he had it. She'd only asked out of irritation. Then come here. You have no training? No, elder. No path at all? No, elder. You're copper, but you've never even taken a taste of aura? I was never given a path, honored elder. I don't know how. You come from a clan of fools. They are my family, honored elder. Ugh! No family of yours. But you can make scales for me, so I'll take you. You'll teach me? I'll work you until your bones are nubs. That's what I'll do for you. You won't get the secrets of the sect until you've brought enough value to us, which you'll do slowly and obediently. Is that clear enough? So he's like, all right, let's do this. And then we get Yeren, who apparently is welcomed into the Fisher family with open fucking arms because she is very good at tracking down these remnants and creatures. And they have been looking for somebody who is as particularly good at this shit as she is. So he's got kind of a good thing going on here being friends with her because by association, there's a little bit of like protection from their respect for her that begins to roll off onto him even in this situation. And she's thinking about how irritated she is at the fact that he decided to take a faction, but she has to recognize he did need training really bad and she can't give it to him. And it's inconvenient, but you know, she can leave, but she knows that he needs her. And she keeps like being a little bit afraid that he's going to ditch her. And she has to remind herself, there's no way he's ditching me. He would fucking die in like a day if I wasn't around to watch his back. So Yeren, the first time that she comes in, she winds up bringing this blue crab remnant. She'd found it by following a team of fishers who had skirted around this remnant as too dangerous. Fisher Gesher rubbed her chin with 2 fingers. What do you want? Shelter in the fissures for me. Training for him. Real stuff. Not this sweep and gather rot. And Lyndon tries to be like, no, we already have a thing going on. The Fisher cut him off with a gesture. You have something else for me, don't you? Yaren slapped the bundle down on the floor, unrolling it with 1 foot. It was a trio of blood-spattered furs that up until a few hours ago had been worn by sand vipers. Dead? Gesha asked, eyes sharp. Not quite, Yaren said, because she had known better than to unleash 3 hostile remnants in the middle of a crowd. But I can tell you they're not happy. A smile creased Gesha's face. I think we can find a space for you. And so the relationship is born. And this makes me so deeply happy. I want to know which of the sand vipers. I'm assuming that she went after the ones that really started some fucking trouble. But I don't have that for sure. It's just an assumption since she saw that whole conflict go down and she needs to make a point here. And then we go to Lyndon's point of view, and he is just being run all around, dividing up these remnants into different parts, and there is apparently this sort of kernel at the heart of the thing called a binding. And she says we fold it into different shapes, use it to build the skeletons, but the heart and soul of every construct is that's not what they fold into different shapes. They fold the other material into different shapes. That, what they call the dead matter. But the binding is the heart and soul of every construct. If we could work with bindings completely, we would. And she says, put your hand over the tube at the top. Point the other end. No, not at me. You want me to toss you out at the floor. Now funnel a trickle of Madra into it. Just a little. Do you hear me? And I feel so bad for him because she's like, just a little. Don't overdo it. And he has to go full out with his effort in order for it to even approach the point that seems like just a little for her. Every time I'm reminded of what a disability this kid has, I'm just like, oh, you poor thing. This is rough. So it spurts out a spray of water. This is a pure lake remnant, primary aspect of water. When this sacred artist was alive, she made water from the aura in the air. This technique she mastered and it became part of her spirit. Her remnant uses this binding, does the same thing. He asks how that happens, and she says patterns. Scripts are shapes that guide Madra. What is a technique, if not weaving Madra in a certain pattern? You move the right Madra in the right way with the right rhythm, and you get a pair of pliers smacked into her open hand, drawn by some technique she'd used. You move it any other way, and you get... She waved her hand. Nothing. You see? And he says, so a binding is like a script inside your soul? You think it's that simple? No, a script is a drawing. A binding is a statue. Bindings are pearls, and remnants are the clams around them, you see? And he's like, I kind of do. Not totally, though. But he's doing his best. He's working and taking a ton of notes and just constantly asking all these questions. And he says, now that you have the binding, you can use it in a construct, one that will automatically produce water. Is that all you can use it for, or can you do something else with it? She pointed at him with the pliers. That is a question worthy of a soulsmith. And he feels very proud of himself for that. And she tells him, don't smile. A smile doesn't go with those eyes. You look like you want to eat me for breakfast. What does that mean? What do his eyes look like? I am so curious about that. She makes him sound like a maniac. I just, I am interested in seeing Lyndon in my head the way he apparently looks. So let's see. I'm trying to find. Oh, okay. So then we have the whole thing with her creating some items. So there's this one guy who comes in and he's covered in snow. And he has this hammer that looks basically like it's made of glass. And when he smashes it into the barn, this ice flower blooms where it landed. Gesha is so irritated. She's like, the fuck, dude? This is my fucking place of business. Why would you do that? You know what? I had to get up to make this shit early so you could come in and get it first thing. And you fucked my shit up, so I think I'm going to charge you like twice what I was going to charge you. And he's like, okay. Like, he just pays it. It's fine. So this is the first time that Lyndon gets a hold of the scale for the first time. And it turns out that it is made of pure Madra. And this is something that he can use to level himself up especially well because his cores are filled with pure Madra since he hasn't taken a path of any kind. I'm assuming that's why, right? Because you absorb certain Madras to go along with the path that you're taking. So since he hasn't got one, he's pure and therefore at kind of a good place to be able to do it this way versus other people. If they have taken a path, they are more limited and they can use this scale to a degree, but not too much, or else it winds up sort of diluting the power that they have. So we go to a scene and I'm only have 5 minutes left, so I'll make it somewhat brief, but there is a scene with Jai Long and this guy Turn, who's a sand viper, and he is apparently one of like the heads of the guards, and he is expressing some frustration with the fact that the miners are unwilling to go into the pyramid due to the danger. And Jai Long like recognizes you can't just like force them in and shut the door behind them and lock it and expect them to go in and do their job. That's not encouraging the kind of productivity that we require. So he finds another way to sort of motivate them. And part of what Turn is saying, he says that the dread beasts are getting worse. We don't know where they're coming from, but there's no end to them. The remnants at the start acted like remnants. Some of them attacked, but some of them just climbed back into the tunnels or sat down or started counting clouds. Now they all want blood. And I wonder if that has something to do with the energy of the spear in here, or if it's the energy of the people around it, the energy of the aura that's being drawn in. I don't know. So Jai Long goes and makes a speech that's basically like, all right, guys, look, I know you don't like being in here, but y'all are in here because you were each too weak for the people that you were standing up against. You tried to go up against us at some point, repaying a debt, fighting a duel, and you lost. And here you are. If any of you don't think that's true, come on out here and let's have it out right now. And so this one dude comes out and is like, all right, look, I'm willing to fight, but you're a high gold and I'm a low gold. And you have to know that's absolutely just not fair. I'm not a coward, but come on. So Jai Long is like, all right, look, why don't you take that collar off him and put it on me? Because it turns out that they have collars that sort of like manage their to keep their Madra from like being accessible to them the same way. And when he has the guy take the collar off, I assumed that he was going to be like, all right, the guy is going to face off against Turn. But then when he has it put on himself, Turn is like very not sure he wants to do this until Jai Long like threatens him. And they fight, and Jai Long kills this guy within like a millisecond. It's like nothing. It's embarrassing, honestly. I felt bad for the guy. And he looks around and he's like, this is why y'all are here. Look, this is just how it is. So you need to come to grips with the fact that this is what it is for you and go do what you're here to do. You have a flaw, and that has led you here. I don't really know what to tell you other than get on with it, is essentially what he says. There is no escape. If you die, same reason, because you're weak and you have flaws. And then he goes and talks to Tern again about getting Lyndon. So we get, first of all, Lyndon learning how to cycle enough to make a scale for himself. And it takes a lot of effort. But he finally does manage to do it. It takes a couple days for him to manage it. And then he gets got by these dudes. They grab him while he's asleep. And it turns out that they hadn't got a real, apparently immediate plan for him, because they lock him up in a cage with a bunch of injured miners, and Gesha comes and gets him and is just like, what the fuck, guys? And assumes that they grabbed him up in the middle of the day, that he couldn't stand up to them in a fight. But when he tells her that he was asleep, she's even more like, God damn it. But tells him, look, man, I can't constantly be coming to save you. You are going to have to figure a way to protect yourself. And while he's in there, he sees all of these scales in these, what I'm essentially thinking of as wheelbarrows. And he looks at it and all he can see is a shortcut to getting to iron. And I am assuming he is going to find some way to get back in there and try and steal some of it. And I am not super excited about how that's going to work out for him. I am super excited because I really want to see it. But I feel like he better involve Yaren and not try and do this shit by himself, first of all. And second of all, I don't want to know what happens if he gets caught, because Jailong wanted his ass anyway. So he's walking right up into their open mouth, you know? So I also like the fact that they didn't put a collar on him and he's not sure why. I assume it's because Jailong wanted him for something specific, but he thinks it's because he isn't even worth collaring, which is actually, that's plausible too. So as Gesha grabs him out of there, he asks her, can't we save everybody else? To which she says, it could be a lot worse actually. And no, we can't. And I just love his relationship with Gesha already. He asks, can I get a path? And she says, do you think you've earned it? You've given so much to the sect that we must give something back to you? And he says, I have nothing but gratitude to you and to the Fisher sect. I will never repay my debt for your kindness in this lifetime. I'm only impatient to contribute more. And I love this. She is really taken by his words here. She genuinely is kind of like, all right, you know what? That was pretty good. And he asks on forging 2 scales a day. She tells him, focus on that, and when you do that, you will get to keep one. He says, if I can do that, how long will it take me to reach iron? And she says, about a year, which isn't too bad. And he's like, yeah, that's not bad. And honestly, it really isn't that bad, considering he never thought he would ever get there. But yeah, he's thinking about the scales in them mines. And that is going to be something. Are we getting a heist? I love heists. All right, I have to go. I'm over time, but thank you again, Andrew, for commissioning this. And I will be seeing you all again next week with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers. Shh.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.